Chicago on Sunday. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Among the members of Iraq Veterans Against the War who threw away their war medals outside the NATO summit here in Chicago, threw them to the NATO generals, they said, was Lance Corporal Scott Olsen. He is the young activist who, after returning from Iraq, got involved with the Occupy movement, and in Oakland, California, was hit by a police projectile that almost took his life. It's fractured his skull. After he threw his medals towards the fence of the NATO summit, I sat down with him as he was marching in the protest. He was wearing a black helmet that protects his head since he has had a fractured skull. This is some of what Scott Olsen had to say.
My name is I came here to Chicago to return my medals to NATO and to be there for my other brothers and sisters who wanted to do the same thing as I did. And returning those medals, I think, was a big step for all of us to take, and it was a step that we all had to take together.
What medal did you return?
I returned 4 medals. I returned the Global War on Terror medal, the Operation Iraqi Freedom medal, the National Defense medal, and the Marine Corps Good Conduct medal.
That's a lot of medals.
Yes.
You served 2 tours of duty in Iraq?
That's correct. When
did you enlist and when did you go to Iraq?
I enlisted shortly after I graduated high school in 2005. In
Wisconsin?
Yes. And in 2006, I went to Iraq for my first time, and we were extended to stay for the surge. And then I went again in 2008. And
what was your experience like?
My experience in Iraq, was really, it wasn't right. Like, I thought that we were over there doing good things and helping these people have a democracy and have a functional country, and at the same time protecting our country. But, every day I spent over there, I found out that that wasn't necessarily the case. I didn't see us really doing any good work. We weren't doing anything that we said we were going to do. And, instead we killed hundreds of thousands of civilians, and we tore their nation apart.
So when you came back after the second time, what did you decide to do?
Well, I decided that there was no way I was going to re-enlist. I wasn't going to participate in the system anymore, and yeah. And
so let's talk about the second part of this journey where you ended up at Occupy in Oakland.
Yeah, after I got out, I found Iraq Veterans Against the War, and I started participating in actions with them and, really making friends with other veterans who thought the same way as I did. So I went up there to the Wisconsin protests last year, and that really radicalized me and made me see that, the true power of being part of a community that's trying to change things for the better. And I saw Occupy as the next step after that, as a continuance of that. And it's something that I was waiting for, and I think it's something that a lot of people were waiting for.
And so what happened to you at Occupy?
October 25th, I went to a protest in Oakland at night, and these people have just been removed from their encampment, and I thought that we had a right to be there. I thought that we had the right to have our voices heard there. So I went there, and a police officer shot me in the head with a beanbag round, and it fractured my skull.
Did you see the officer?
I did not. It came out of nowhere. It came from my side, and
How do you know it was beanbag?
We had a test done, and the test results revealed that the pattern was consistent with what it would be if it were a beanbag round, so that confirmed it.
And so you ended up in the hospital, and how long were you in the hospital, and how long were you able, so you had a fractured skull?
Right, so I went to the hospital. I was in the hospital for 2.5 weeks. I could not talk while I was in the hospital until the last few days when I regained that, starting to be able to talk again. I had neurosurgery and skull reconstruction surgery, so it was a very, hard to be in the hospital, and it was a lot to go through. But I'm really glad that I really committed myself to getting better.
So how did you go from Occupy Oakland, the hospital rehab, to this NATO summit and willing to face whatever you would face here?
Well, I'm really not going to let their actions stop me, and I'm not going to let that stop me and keep me home. I'm going to make every effort I can to show them that we're doing the right thing. We're in the right, and no matter what they do to any of us, we've got each other's backs, and we're going forward.
And to see the police and the riot police with their helmets, the police officers on horseback.
I mean, that still always gets to me. I mean, they're always trying to intimidate us and, keep our numbers down, keep families home. People don't want to bring out kids when there's a threat of violence. So that's what that represents to me, and that's why I was wearing my helmet today. I can't be too safe. Anything could happen, and
So you were wearing a black shiny helmet.
Right, I was wearing a helmet for my safety, and I have to do that every time I go out to a protest where there's a threat of violence from the police.
Because?
Because they have been using violence across the country, and they still do, and people are still getting hurt. And
if you got hit again in the head?
Right. Since I had a recent brain injury, another hit would probably be deadly or cause much more damage, so I really can't take that risk.
Lance Corporal Scott Olsen of Iraq Veterans Against the War, speaking Sunday after he threw his war medals towards the gate of the NATO summit, among more than 40 other veterans of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan protesting the NATO summit.